The Pod Network Entertainment.
You're listening to the adoboTalks podcast, The Business of Creativity, a series of high-level inspirational and educational sessions on how creativity unleashes inventive solutions that fuel the economy. In each episode, we'll be learning essential lessons through conversations with some of the brightest minds in the creative industries. I'm Angel Guerrero, founder, president, and editor-in-chief of Adobo Magazine. Today's episode is called Use It or Lose, Why We Must Embrace the Disruptive Technologies as Permanent Fixtures in Our Creative Playgrounds. And sharing her insights and expertise on the matter is the current head of product design for Globe Group, as well as the former president of the Digital Marketing Association of the Philippines, Denise Haak. Hello, welcome.
Hi.
Welcome to our adoboTalks and welcome to the studio and Hit Productions.
Thank you. It's such a great studio. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm sorry you had a difficult time finding your way, but I'm glad you finally made
It's okay.
it.
Nobody needs to know where it is. It's our little secret studio.
Yes, indeed. Well, first, I wanted to, aside from what I've said about Denise, there's a little more about her because I checked your LinkedIn and, I couldn't understand what it was all about. So I'm going to ask you today, okay, you are CX, UX, UI, XD, IA, HF, HCD, AIIY, AI, and founder of Kiddity, whatever. What is all of that? What does it make you?
So it makes me alphabet soup. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, what I like about the tech space is they use a lot of acronyms to make us sound smarter, more mysterious. But really, what we're doing is what we should have been doing for years. So things like customer experience, user experience, accessibility, which is that
So the
A11 line.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is HCD?
Human-centered design.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
HF?
Human factors.
See, these are terminologies that we don't know much of. We know UX, UI, CX.
Yeah.
But how did you get to in this space? We want to know a little more about how you, Denise Haak, a female graduate of computer science, got so geeky and so nerdy.
So I think I've always kind of been this way where I liked playing around with how things worked. And then eventually, as I said yes to more and more things that I didn't really know I needed, I ended up founding a company that came from an idea born in Google. So in Google, we have this thing where you do dog fooding. I don't know if you've heard of dog fooding.
No, I'm not.
So dog fooding is an industry term in tech where you have to try your own products before you put them out into the market.
Okay.
So supposedly, if it isn't good enough for you, it shouldn't be good enough for your dog. And in that dog fooding space is where you design, you test, you iterate all of the products that you make. And as I was part of this dog fooding team, out of pure volunteerism, I realized I fell in love with this whole process. And that nobody is doing this outside of these big tech giants like Google and Apple and Facebook, etc. And I said, what if I created a company that helped other companies think this way, where you can test and iterate and design things for actual human beings? And then the rest is nerd history.
So that's human design, as you call it?
Yes, human-centered design or user-centered design, yeah.
So that was Kiddity,
Yes.
correct? Which was eventually sold?
Yes.
And Kairos is another company you
Yes.
founded, and both are in the same field.
Yes, Kairos was just a rebrand for the joint venture.
So you're rich. Somebody's actually bought your startup.
No. I sold for a pittance, guys, a pittance.
She's rich, guys. Anyone who sells tech companies does well. And the other thing I'd like to ask is, I know that being a female geek or nerd, remember we had the discussion, are you a geek or nerd? What do we call, how do we term you?
Any.
Both
are
works.
very flattering. Yeah.
And in a very male-dominated space, you mentioned that, where you were one of the only females in the class. Tell me what that experience was like. And what made you still continue to do what you do?
Yeah. So, I guess I have to inadvertently thank my mother because this was so not the course I wanted to take.
Right.
But she was the one who recommended I take computer science. And yes, I was not only the only female in a sea of males, I was also the only white person in a sea of Chinese boys in LaSalle.
Okay.
But I think the reason I stuck it out was there was something very empowering. You felt very special. And special not because you were alone, but special because you were first.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt that this was going to be something more women would get into in the future, but
Are you disappointed that there are not enough?
I'm still disappointed. That is a perfect question. I thought by now there'd be so many more of us, and we're still kind of the minority, and in the worst sense. We keep getting relegated to female-esque tech. So if you're a startup for a makeup brand or a beauty brand, you should be female. But if you're a startup, let's say for, robust hardware and chips,
you have to be male.
You have to be male.
So here we go, guys. We need more of the ladies out there to do what you... So in this conversation, we hope to inspire more women to emulate what you do. Now, when you start something that's unique and pioneering and you have no reference, right? What was your reference? What company were you emulating?
That is also a great question. So thankfully, by then, there was this lovely thing called Google. So you can Google stuff. But I discovered that there are some really cool companies that do what we do, and they've been doing it for much longer.
But not here in the Philippines.
Not here in the Philippines. So there's the Nielsen Norman Group.
Okay.
In fact, both Nielsen and Norman wrote their own books on the subject. So if you guys want to learn about that, you can pick up their books. Then there's Frog Design. There's the Cooper Group. There's the W Group by Susan Weinshank and her son, and many others. And again, as I name all of this, there's probably like 15 rock star VIPs in my practice, and only one is a woman, and it's kind of disappointing.
Well, thank you for leading the way then for the Philippines.
Yes, women, come to this. Yes.
So we now know a little more about you. You probably dismantled computers when you were young.
I did.
Oh, there we go.
I really did. Yes,
Okay.
I was one of those.
Oh,
yes.
my goodness.
I would join competitions. Yes.
And win.
And we would win.
Oh,
yes.
marvelous.
And it was mind-blowingly difficult. Like, I don't understand how we were able to do that when I look back. I mean, you have this entire tower because, yes, kids, before your laptop, computers came with these gigantic towers where you would put in your floppy disks. And you would have this gigantic tower that was broken up into pieces, and you would have less than 90 seconds to put it all together. And I don't know how we were able to do that, but spectacular, rush and adrenaline.
So would you say you have a scientific mind or a mathematical mind?
I would say I have a scientific approach.
Okay.
But I wouldn't necessarily say I have a mathematical mind, I think. I'm still very...
I know there's a side of you that's funny. I know.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later.
Okay. Ooh, sipping her tea.
Okay. So before we really get into the meat of things, how would you personally define this, this term disruptive technology? There's always a conversation about that. And what are your favorite examples of what is disruptive technology?
Yeah, so for me, anything disruptive is something that forces you, whether you like it or not, whether for good or for bad, to pivot. You could pivot your business model, you could pivot your ways of working, you could pivot even your target audience. As long as you're being forced to pivot because of this technology, then it's disruptive. And some of the ones we know, like virtual reality or AI, are quite disruptive today. But the really cool ones too, that things like quantum mechanics or quantum computing, and even this really cool thing where cell phones can now go at the speed of light. No, I'm just joking. I work for Globe.
Wish.
It's called 5G, guys. 5G is the new disrupt. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Yeah. But so I do think disruptive technology gets a bad rap.
It does. And how do you think it impacts on creativity? You mentioned AI.
Yeah.
But what other ways? What are the pros and cons of having disruptive technology? Is it something positive or negative, one would ask?
I think technology is like any other thing.
And I think the term disruptive already says it, right?
Correct. I mean, the minute you feel disrupted, it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I think technology in any sense, whether disruptive or not, is really in the hands of whoever's using it.
Is it?
Yeah.
I don't know. The acceleration is so fast now.
I think it's more the comfort. People get comfortable in what they know and what they're doing. If you were still in the same thing you were doing and you just had to do it faster, you wouldn't feel disrupted.
True. I would say,
Yeah.
We're very adaptive people, right?
Yeah.
So now it's faster than we normally know it to be. And you're caught,
Yeah.
unawares,
Yeah, exactly.
and unprepared.
Correct. And you're not ready or not, you're not even willing for it. So I don't know if it's necessarily the acceleration, but definitely it's something that forces you to change.
So on the topic of creativity, right, disruptive technology affecting creativity, it would automatically, simply the fact that it is disruptive, it makes you think another way or looking for solutions in another way, right? Okay. So emerging technology have always come with the implicit invitation to experiment with them. So how do you determine which technologies are worth trying out and which aren't? Because there's so much out there now, and we're spoiled for choice, even from a corporate point of view or a personal point of view. How would one choose?
So I have a great anecdote that answers that question. It's not, it's a story when I was in Google. And a similar question was asked to our then CEO, Larry Page. And it was exactly the same. How do we choose which technologies we're going to try out?
Okay.
And he said, well, the answer to that question lies in the toaster. And he was saying how, if you think about it, the toaster hasn't evolved much in the last couple of decades. Maybe horizontal product developments like a toaster oven, but the main toaster behaves and is built exactly the same way. And considering all the technology and all the innovation that's happened in the last couple of decades, you'd think they'd improve it enough so that it doesn't do the one thing that it still does today, which is burn your toast.
Oh, I can relate. I have toast every morning.
Right.
And it's never perfect. And you're right. It's one of the earliest inventions, and no one bothers. So I think the thing is, people are not giving enough attention to the toaster.
Because the toaster is not going to change the world. If you focus on emerging tech or disruptive tech for the toaster innovation, then you're not really going to affect the world.
Oh my goodness.
And I think that's
somebody would.
The real answer to this question. How do you know what to try? What do you think will move the world? What do you think will move your business? And what do you think is something that, even if you make a mistake, is not something that you look at it and go, that was a waste of my time?
How does one decide? Is enough information out there, you
Well,
think?
there's data for sure, predictive models, AI can help you decide.
Oh, yes.
But we are creative. So for me, I'm a big believer in instinct. Go with your gut. Your gut will tell you if this disruptive tech is something that you will change the world.
In fact, somebody just mentioned to me that they didn't get a project because AI said.
No, that is
AI
awesome.
made the decision.
That is, guys. Maybe AI can be a therapist.
Indeed. Oh, it's getting there. Now, what has your experience with Web3?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, taught you about creativity, especially in the brand and advertising space. I know that you've worked in Ogilvy,
yes,
correct, and MRM.
Yeah.
So you have advertising experience. So it's a great question to ask you. So what has Web3 taught you about creativity in this space of brand and advertising?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about Web 3.0 is it actually democratizes how we store and process stuff. So back then, and even again today, we're very, very guarded about what we own. So when we create something and we build it, it becomes something that we need the whole world to stamp with, hey, this agency made this material. And the nice thing about Web3 or things like the blockchain is it democratizes who stores it, but it doesn't democratize who made it. So you can put it up there in the chain, and if Angel was the one who created this thing and put it up there on the chain,
then it's
forever Angel.
Yes.
You're never
but
ever going to be able to change that.
If somebody else creates it and you put it up, it's the one who puts it up.
Correct.
Okay.
Right? And yes, you can buy access to the thing, but you're never going to replace the creation of the thing. So there's a term for it in art. When art gets passed and bought, it starts with a letter P. I can't remember. Progenitor or
Okay, yeah.
So in a weird way, Web 3.0 secures that. So that we know exactly who created it, when it was created.
Why do you think it evolved into Web 3.0? I mean, what drew it to happen?
I think it's more... When tech evolves,
why was it important to even have safety and storage of what you know?
That's a good question, because the big wigs or the big tech giants own everything. They own all the servers, they own all the space, they own all the data, and that also means they can control capital and commerce. So they can decide how much to charge you for your storage. They can decide how much to charge you for your usage, and they can even process the data and not tell you about it.
Indeed.
And blockchain, I think, evolved to remove that, to decentralize not just the storage of the data, but the processing of the data.
And I guess everyone has their right to own what they own.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be the tech giant. It gives you that opportunity.
And everybody has a right to access this, too, is, I think, the bigger point. Yeah.
So, guys, I hope you're keeping up with this tech talk.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's this conversation about AI. I mean, everywhere. I mean, in practically every podcast I've had, there's a question on AI. Of course, you're the geek girl, so I'm going to ask you, what's your view on AI vis-a-vis, of course, creativity? It's definitely impacting the way we work and the way we think, and it's also an enabler. So I love your point of view. Does it help or hinder innovation?
Yeah, it's like any tool. It's really in the hands of whoever's wielding it. So if you're the kind of person that will wield it for good, then AI will turn out good. And if you're the kind of person that wants to use it for nefarious purposes, it will probably help you do that as well. But I think for me, the biggest impact AI has that hasn't been seen in creativity, not in a long time, even maybe since its inception, is the idea of ethics.
Yes.
Because now we have so much power to create these things and to create things based on what other people have created and not give them credit for it, and maybe not even be very transparent or authentic. And we never had to worry about that as creatives. As creatives, everything we did was authentic. It came from us, you know, and we were the source. And now when we use AI, fully aware that it is borrowing from other spaces and other creations all around the world and all around the internet, what is our liability? Not just to declare that co-creation, but to declare to our customers that, hey, this is not entirely made from hand. You know, we got some help with this particular creative. And there's really an ethical imperative creatively for me that hasn't existed in this way before.
And it's really hard to actually protect that, or the IP of any creative. Once you put your work out there, whether it's a photograph, can be used for AI.
Yeah.
So sorry, artists, sorry, art, you know, everybody who's put work out there, AI can pick it up and use it.
And so we, the people who are picking it up, we need to remember that. And we need to be very morally, you know, right about it.
So outside of that, how has it impacted creatives? You think creativity has flourished as a result of AI?
I think so. I think for one thing, it now forces us to know who the winners and the losers are. These people who take AI and are not daunted by it and say, you know what, fine, I will take that challenge and either work with it or even try to beat it. They're the winners. And the ones who are like, oh, it's going to take my job and I'm never going to be able to create anything again. And unfortunately, those are the losers. And I like that because if I'm a client, I would like to see that kind of gumption, the winning gumption in a different arena entirely. I'd like to see that gumption so strong that if I jokingly tell you, I will hire your creative agency to pitch against an AI tool that I have in my office.
That's going to be a great pitch.
And you would take that on.
Yeah, for sure.
I think I would have gotten sold at the door, that you agreed to that you shook on that and said, okay, I'll compete against AI, I'll do it. You know, because there's something that AI can still never duplicate that only humans can do, and that's empathy.
Empathy.
Yeah.
I was thinking. I was going to ask you actually that particular thing. How can AI have empathy? So right now, I mean, earlier on, I had a guest, and he was talking about how he uses it in advertising. So how it's helped is he can actually do deepfake by, you know, in
That's
a pitch.
true, yeah.
It's like, okay, I can get somebody's voice, here's the storyboard, draw it up, or do a video, that voice, that celebrity, they can create it and pitch it. And well, not use it, but pitch it and say, here is how a celebrity will look if they even talked,
And
said
that's
your line.
brilliant, because now the client doesn't have to imagine.
That's
they can
right.
see it. Yeah.
So I think they've used it in a very clever way.
I think so.
In that way, I mean, it's the first I've heard where, oh, Angel, we just typed out the script and picked the voice and voila. And then we use a celebrity's face, make her say it. I said, oh my goodness, how far we've gone when it comes to the advertising pitching process.
And exactly, now you can concentrate on more how to say human things like strategy, etc.
Correct,
You don't have to like manually do all of these things.
Yes, that is a time saver. Now, going back to blockchain, and it's intriguing to note that both blockchain and AI have very vocal detractors, despite their promise. Why do you think that is? Why are there so many detractors in both blockchain and AI? Why is that? I mean, you mentioned ethical things, and you mentioned that it takes away from whoever's property that particular work is. But how about blockchain?
I think it has to do with the regulatory stuff. Things that don't have regulation tend to get a lot of clamor, especially things like blockchain and crypto. I'm still a big believer in crypto, even though I know there's like scams. I'm sorry, guys, if you got scammed. And I know there's a lot of bad news out there, but there are good actors too, and a lot of white hats that are using blockchain and cryptocurrency for good. But because it's unregulated, it scares people, and rightly so.
So it remains unregulated to this day?
It's quite unregulated. The regulators do try, but because that's not their forte, that's not their wheelhouse. It's very different when you have a private sector person who's mastered these things, or at least has had a head start in the mastery of these things, trying to draft up regulation, than a public sector person that's always catching up. And so whatever regulation we do have, I don't think is sufficient, and it's definitely not forward or future proof. Definitely not. And
so how would you encourage them to, I mean, since you're pro blockchain, how would you encourage people and give them confidence to use these technologies?
So definitely regulation, but remembering that...
Well, what are the benefits, actually, of using blockchain?
Of blockchain. Well, for one thing, as I said, it's decentralized. So now you can store things where people won't, go, oh my gosh, I just lost everything because it was stored in some server that crashed. The second thing is it's open for anybody to verify and validate. And it takes a lot of computing power to do that. So what most people don't know is the blockchain is actually very good at preventing fraud.
There we go.
Yeah, very good at preventing fraud.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So on the flip side, what needs to happen when it comes to, we talked about policy before, and to ensure that it benefits humans and, of course, creativity ethically. Just curious about, because I know the policies that people are talking about right now and actually currently still working on is data privacy. And that's been a focus for quite some time. So what do you think, what else needs to be done when it comes to policies for the tech world?
Definitely more about like security things. People are very, very scared about their security. I think they'd like things to be more transparent. The irony being it used to be all about privacy, and now it's all about transparency.
That's right.
So I think that's what will get people to believe, not just in blockchain, especially AI. People don't understand how AI works entirely, like how it's able to do all of this stuff. And it's not that anybody's trying to not tell them about it. I think it's just not good at communicating.
I couldn't agree more, because when I talk to people in ad agencies, they do say, yeah, we know blockchain, we know AI, and we know how it's going to affect. When I ask them, actually using it in your company? No. Everyone uses it individually.
Correct.
Like if an art director chooses to personally use it, fine. But as a company, they've never applied it. It's the same reason. Brands are not using it. They're afraid to use AI. I know some companies who said, I've been trying to ask my CEO to take in AI, but they refuse because it's untried, untested.
And this brings up a good point. Like, I'm going to plug DMAP now. So if you guys aren't members of DMAP, please, the Digital Marketing Association. But in order to actually address that, we came up with a framework. It's a framework I actually created just last year, and I left it with them because I can't use it where I work now. But it's an acronym ABCDE.
Okay.
So the first thing we need to do is create awareness. Just that some people don't know that these technologies exist, and it's very, very important that they do. Because again, the ethical imperative. Then the second is we need to create belief. As mentioned, technology is only as good or as bad as the people who wield it. So we can't suddenly say technology is not a good thing. So creating belief that these technologies can be used for good and can help us, like your wonderful example of the deep fake to show a client in a pitch. So to create that belief system. And then the third is clarify things. Just clarify what it is, not what we, not how it works, but clarify this is what we know and this is what we don't know. And that's okay. This is how we know it works, and this is how we know we can use it, and the rest we don't. And then the fourth is, for me, one of the most important, which is discourse. You really need to discuss these things, and sometimes over and over. I mean, you mentioned every time you talk to somebody, AI is in the topic. And I think that's important because you do formulate new ideas, new opinions, and think of new solutions to otherwise problems that might not have come up. And then the fifth is find experts.
Yes.
You have to find experts. So that's the E, yeah.
Yeah, the find experts is the tough one.
Yeah.
Even when I'm looking for somebody to talk about AI and teach AI, there's not a lot around. So why do you think that is? Why is there no real well, I don't see them. They're online. I see Learn AI, right? There's a masterclass on AI. It's all online, but locally it's really tough to find someone who can actually teach, go to different, companies and start saying, this is how you use AI. How does one start?
I think it's difficult because we don't know how to sift which is the correct information and which is the fake information. But I also feel like we're waiting for an expert to kind of materialize in front of us, when very often with disruptive or emerging technology,
You learn it yourself?
you have to build the experts.
build the
If you can't
experts.
find one, build one. So I think that's what we're missing. So when we talk about building expertise, I don't see why we can't find our most, technological advanced kid in the office and send him off to a 3-month course and have him be the expert, not just for our own companies, but for the country.
What background would one have to be an AI expert or learn about AI, you think?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or what
well,
skills?
I don't
kind of
think they need to
person?
know about code necessarily, but they
Okay.
need to know about machine learning for sure.
Okay.
How machine learning works on a very basic level.
Mm-hmm.
They need to understand how machine learning fails, like what's the learning models, because there are different kinds of learning models, and how
Okay.
machine learning succeeds. So is it language based? Is it image based, etc.? And generally, they just need to be interested in creative tech. Like if you have a person who's both creative and tech savvy, that would be the perfect person to become.
Isn't that great? I love the sound of creative tech.
Yeah.
Because normally it's not, it's one or the other.
Usually, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you do see brands who embrace this technology falling behind significantly. Why or why not? I mean, what brands do you know that are using tech? And
Yeah.
are they doing well? I mean, I know
So-
e-commerce is flying, though.
It's funny. The answer to this question is actually kind of like where we're circling around in this topic.
Yeah.
You know that your brand or your company failed to adopt tech when you got disrupted by tech. So fintech is one of my favorite examples
Okay.
because fintech came on the scene and kind of disrupted the
Yeah.
institutional banking scene. And so that tells some of those banks, see, you took too long.
Even retail.
Yeah, or retail, you took too long, right? Or, commercial stuff. But even travel and leisure, there are many hotels and many resorts that took a long time to adapt. And I'm sorry, these new startups that are actually leveraging disruptive technology became the industry disruptors themselves.
Yes.
So I think for me, that's how you know that you got left behind and you didn't adopt the tech early enough. Yeah.
Great. So what do you feel are the biggest mistakes company make, right, in an effort to adopt early,
Yeah, this is the opposite problem
Yeah.
we just mentioned.
Like I remember I started doing QR codes 10 years ago in my
Yeah.
magazine, hoping somebody would read it and go to the site. I was years too early, and now everyone uses.
And now everyone
I mean,
uses
that's
it.
a simplistic way of looking at things.
So there is a term for that. You know how sometimes when you do technology, you're leading edge, or even if it's not technology, if you're exploring a new innovation in your industry, you're leading edge. But if you try technology and innovation just for the sake of trying it because it's new, it's called bleeding edge.
Bleeding edge.
And so that's the
Okay.
mistake you guys want to avoid. Don't try tech for the sake of tech.
Okay.
There are many times that it's a new technology and it's a buzzword, but if it doesn't apply to your business model or if it doesn't, it's not something that will resonate with your customer base, then it's okay. You don't have to adopt that. You can just try something else that might not seem so sexy and shiny, but it's still innovative and it's still disruptive and it'll. Yeah, I
So what
think it'll-
companies can you ID them?
I will just say there was a mall some years ago that tried
Okay.
to do this AR
Oh, yes, I
butterfly
remember that. Yes, I
thing.
know that, yeah.
Yeah, and that didn't take either. Yeah. I mean, I know AR was so cool
AR was
at the
cool.
time. But,
AR didn't really pick up. Yeah, people tried it and somehow.
and I think
yeah.
that's because we were more fascinated with the technology than the use cases. Like, where and how can we use this technology became a back after.
But I can imagine now with everybody's mobile phone in their hands and they see something and they AR it and they get something else out of it. It should fly now, I believe, creatively.
And you'd think it did after Pokemon Go, for example.
Yes,
that was
yes,
a
I
phenomenal
tried that, yes.
use case.
I ran over stuff and fell down,
and
doing that.
People, oh my God, really? You do?
Yes.
Oh.
I was in the beach, like, oh, where's the Pokemon?
I'm so sorry. I was such a fan of that game.
No, it's great, though. I
Yeah.
did have fun, yeah.
But I think the reason why nothing has come close to duplicating it is because people didn't understand why that was a phenomenon in the first place.
place.
It wasn't because of the technology. I mean, yeah, that was cool, the AR. but they didn't understand that we were tapping into a deep psychological need, and that's the hunt. We like to hunt for things, and that's what made it interesting. And until we understand the whys behind the technologies that are just the what's in the hows, we're never really going to adapt them well enough for.
I think that's a great example of, somebody using AR and it became a hit, and then boom, it disappeared just like that.
Sayang.
This question comes up now. What executions involving the blockchain and AI have been particularly exciting to you?
Okay.
Have you seen any?
So when you use the word exciting, this can be both positive and negative. So for me, anything that's talked about immensely, almost like car crash TV talk, that's exciting. So to be honest, cryptocurrency and what's been going on in that space is really exciting for me. There are winners, there are losers, there are scammers, and there are white hats. And it's always in the news, and there's always something different, and everybody's just like waiting for the last shoe to drop on this thing. And I think that's really exciting because it's like the wild, wild west, and you don't know what you're going to get. And everybody's just trying all of these new things out, and you never know who's going to be the last man standing, and that's one of the things I find exciting. In AI, I find music creation in AI extremely exciting. There's a lot of new stuff coming in, and I don't know how visual artists are already getting upset.
Yes.
And to a degree, it's very easy to identify if AI stole from your work. But if it's audio, and we are in a studio that might be considering this.
No, they are. We have a lot of conversations here at HIT about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And if, it's very, very difficult sometimes to identify. Or will HIT production start using AI voiceover artists instead of human
They are.
ones?
In fact, here they were saying that a person could have a voice that, say, identify with a certain role, right? See, I'm an animation, and I'm a character in a movie, and my voice is linked to it. You can now sell your AI voice. So there are rate cards for AI voice.
No.
Yeah, it's
See,
like
I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
and I was so fascinated by this AI
but
audio
then you have
thing.
you have to just be ahead of the curve, knowing that it's going to be there. But you can charge now.
Yeah.
If you're using my voice, if you want to borrow it,
Because somebody might use it anyway and not pay
Yeah,
for
and
it.
not
That
pay
is
for
true.
it.
That is true. Yeah.
Fascinating. You're right about audio and music.
Yeah, super
see
cool.
where it takes us.
Yeah.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you earlier when you talk about policy and government, right? We also talk about, is tech bad for the environment, right? So we know that when you do crypto or whatever, there's a lot of
Processing
space,
power.
processing power, and all these fields of
Computers.
stacks of computers that take over large areas of the world just to keep this running. It's a tough one. It's not good for the environment. So that's a downside of tech, isn't it? It's what will fix that, you think, in the near future?
I think, again, we go back to the question of ethics, right? We talk about ethics being inextricably linked to these disruptive technologies. And that's why things like blockchain are interesting to me. I know it's not good for the environment that we need to process all of this stuff, but at the risk of what? So we have to weigh that. And I think these ethical imperatives that we have, where we start deciding, is this something that will benefit humanity in a different way? Or could we use it to give back? Can we actually start doing footprint tracking as we're using these emerging or disruptive tech? I think is the ethical question. But more than that, one of the things that I find fascinating is people assume that technology is anti-environment.
Yeah.
And I haven't actually seen that. Truthfully, it's human beings that are anti-environment. And to put the blame on technology is like to put the blame on a gun that happened to hurt somebody. It isn't the gun, it's the person. And so I think in terms of things pertaining to the environment and sustainability, we have to remember it's still on us. It's really. And
I think whoever is, like, my son is taking up quantum tech, and he's trying to advance the speed of tech.
Yeah.
And I said, when is your project going to be done? Who knows? 10, 20 years. One never knows. But the thing is, whatever he discovers or his group discovers is try to reduce that. Cooling agent for computers that heat up. These are things that are still in the stage of discovery.
Yeah.
So I'm in hope that whatever tech and these machines that we use for crypto is going to reduced. You know, the way
But
mobile
that's why we
phones
need-
used to be
that's why we
huge,
need
now they're
kids
tiny.
like that. You know,
Yeah.
we need young people like that are more conscientious in general, that have that awareness. And we might not find the solution right away, but if we start, we'll get there sooner than if we don't. Yeah.
And I did tell you that, you know, you talk about drones. Drones can be used for war. Drones can also be used to, you know, fertilize fields without having humans go around and fertilize
Yeah, we talked
and
about that
water.
too, and I was
think
like-
that's the upside of tech. You know,
now,
one of the
now
wonderful
kids will like to
things.
farm because it's like
Yes.
gaming. You know,
Yes,
It's like,
I want to fly this airplane. I want to drop the seeds this way, and voila,
Yeah,
I get a
that's true.
farm.
Yeah.
So lastly, I understand that you're quite a poet. One of the things I saw as well in your LinkedIn CV is the fact that, you know, you're for humor, and I know you do open mic gigs,
Mm-hmm.
very different from the geek side.
Yeah.
So tell us why and what do you do outside of work, and what's this love for poetry and open mic? How does it come out? How does it manifest in someone like you?
Yeah, I think it's a different side of creative. As a tech person in the creative space, my job is to solve problems. It's like puzzles. And so the creation I make is like that scene in Apollo 13 where they go, we have to make this fit into this using only this. And that takes a certain kind of creativity. And then I end up missing that pure creativity where you make something beautiful from literally nothing. And that's why I like it, you know, from poetry or spoken word to music, original music, to even magic. Now, magic's interesting because you take something and make it into nothing. No, I'm just kidding. But I do love doing this because it reminds me that there is still a soul in the human being, you know, and there's still a pure thing that technology will never, ever be able to erase, never be able to fully articulate or duplicate. In a way that we become obsolete, you know.
You know the term they use is sentient, right?
Yeah.
So what does that mean when you say sentient tech in AI and all that?
Supposedly is that they can think like humans.
Exactly. So they're training.
And I don't mind that. They
Yeah.
can think like us, but they'll never be able to feel like us. They won't be able to, they can mimic emotion, but they'll never really be able to feel the things we feel.
So that's really great, guys. You know, we here is experts saying that they're not going to take over what we do.
I don't think so.
We have to be smarter than the machines.
Yeah.
The machines will not take over what we do, but we take over what machines can do and use it for help.
Yeah.
Well, okay. One of the questions I like to ask is how can AI help us better recognize the humanity within ourselves and others? How would it help?
That's a great question. And one of the shows I like that actually answers this a lot is that show Black Mirror.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of people know already now that Black Mirror is exactly that, because when you look at technology, it usually comes with a screen, and that screen is black, whether it's your mobile phone or your laptop or even your television. And while Black Mirror talks about the darker side of technology, the basic premise is technology reflects who we are as a human being. There are many times that I see myself scrolling a feed and consuming content that I didn't realize were things I liked or that I was interested in. And some of them are not even just guilty pleasures. They're just completely on a different plane that I'm like, I never knew that I'm interested in, I don't know, the UK royal family. You know, I mean,
I get fed those things.
you know, well, yours is a little bit closer to home, but it inadvertently, not just tech, but something like AI is a reflection of who you really are before you might even know who you are.
Yes.
You know, and that's
Good point.
It's a scary thing, but it's also
A discovery
good
of
thing.
self.
Yeah,
Right?
You know,
It's
and you can literally see AI reflecting the entirety of humanity back at us. If you're afraid of what AI has been doing, that means you're afraid of what humanity has done in the past, because it's only getting from there.
And maybe what it tells you about yourself.
And what it tells us about ourselves. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that was such a great conversation, Denise, and gives us a lot to think about. Thank you. And, well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of adoboTalks podcast with today's special guest, Denise Haak. Well, let's give a little toast.
Yay!
I know your coffee's nearly done. But
Yes.
cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, the adoboTalks podcast, The Business of Creativity, is available on Spotify, SoundCloud, and Adobo Magazine, and of course, YouTube. The adoboTalks podcast, The Business of Creativity, is produced by Adobo Magazine, The Word on Creativity, in partnership with the Pod Network, and recorded in partnership with Hit Productions. Tune in next week for another insightful conversation with one of the brightest minds in our creative industries.
The opinions of podcast creators, hosts, and guests are not necessarily reflective of the official stance of the Pod Network Entertainment, its hosts, or other network programs. The content created by the people behind the podcast is personal and not meant to harm any religion, ethnicity, group, organization, company, or individual.